Oh, it's a real pleasure to be with you here tonight. Do we have any veterans in the crowd? Because when I was talking to the little kids and they see all these medals, I told them, well, that's how I won the war. But the medals on this side are all offices I held in the Legion over 60-some years, and these are our military medals. They really come out the same size, but I had them made in small to cut the weight down. Anyways, I was with Canadian National Railways as a telegraph operator, and when the war started, I was gung-ho to head out somewhere to beat those Germans, but the railroad said, Jack, we can't run a railroad without men, so you got to stay here for a while. I was a little disappointed because my friends and that were heading off to Manchester. Some of them didn't come back, so I guess we can't say it was all good or bad. But anyways, I got a call later and I was able to go and join the Navy. I went to Ottawa, and they said, well, why do you want to go into the Navy? I said, he says, what was your work in life? I said, I was a telegrapher. Oh, he says, we need those guys. You just come over this way. They put me in the special department, and it was called secret information. And I went from Ottawa, took the basic training there in the military, got into the uniform, and then went to Toronto. And the automobile building at that time was called HMCS York. That was a ship, the York. And we took all the training there that we could. And I remember they had the testing there for seasickness. And it was a big swing. And the guy said, no, don't stay on there till you're sick. But he says, we want to see how the effects of the seasickness are. So I had a very nice date that evening, so I got on the swing, and after about 4 scoops I said, oh, better stop. So I wasn't going to be sick for the evening. Anyways, I went from there. I was drafted to Newfoundland, and at that time, of course, Newfoundland was an overseas country, a strange country. And we were sent to Harbour Grace, which is where Lindbergh took off to head over the strip overseas. Can I get more water? I'm just getting over a cold I had, so my throat's still dry. And our job there was to listen in on German transmissions. And when the submarines had come up and make a call on what they're doing or where they were or what they were going to do, we would take a bearing on them with by getting a focal on the strength of their signal. And a lot of them were down in the Indian Ocean, and that, but Ottawa and New York and different places were the headquarters. They knew how to tell where they were coming from. So we would listening in and take a bearing, and they would send these messages all in code, of course, and a lot of them were fake messages. They would, just to keep the enemy busy thinking they were getting information, we would be copying, but it wasn't long before when the Navy finally got the submarine and stole the decoding information off, that the Germans didn't realize that we were clearing up their messages and finding out what they were doing. So I was in Harbour Grace there for about 6 months before I decided I'd like to go to sea. And that took a little while because they said, oh, we need you up here. But by this time they had put these instruments on the ships to take bearings on the submarines. And it was the first time I'd seen what they called a cathode ray tube at that time. It was something like a television tube. And you would sit, when the Germans would come up and send their transmission, the little beam would be up there flashed, and you would turn around to get a dial on it, and you would say it's at 360 degrees or whatever it was. And this way, when these were all phoned in from around the world, they would know where those submarines were. So if the convoy was heading south and the submarine was that way, we'd head north. And that's the way they avoided a lot of that. So the first, I remember the first trip overseas was out of St. John's, Newfoundland, and that harbor in St. John is a real protected, I don't know if it had been there, but it just goes through a narrow gauge to get out to the ocean. And even at that, I could feel I could feel the ship going up and down a little bit. And we left, and when we hit that ocean, that North Atlantic, I'll tell you, you'd swear the ship was going to go down under it, and about 3 or 4 of those scoops, and my stomach was starting to go. And sure enough, I was up at the side, and I looked down, and here's an officer with about 5 stripes on his arm, and he was bringing up the same as me. So I guess I had a lot of company. Well, after about 4 days to 5 days of just, seasickness can be the worst, I think, especially when you're supposed to be fighting a duty and then having this on you. And I went down to the doctor. We had a doctor aboard ship, and I said, I haven't eaten in 4 or 5 days, doctor. He says, come on in, he says. And he had a bed in there that had all the swivels on it that moved with the ship. He says, lay down there. Well, gee, just when I lay down there, that was heaven. And he says, you know, sailor, you can only stay in here for half an hour. So he brought me in some OXO, hot OXO, and boy, that tasted so good. And I was laying there gradually getting my sea legs, you know, and finally he says, okay, it's time to go, sailor. Well, I put my feet on the deck and the OXO came up right next. But once I got my sea legs, that was the secret of Davy. Even we had a dog aboard ship. The captain had a little dog, and you'd see the dog walking down. He got seasick, and they made little hammocks for him out on the deck. But there was fortunately, the seasickness lasted about 5-6 days, and after that, you were back. It didn't matter how rough the sea got, you were all right. So we made quite a few trips across to Londonderry. In fact, we took the largest convoy that was ever taken across, something like over 100 and some ships. And the only excitement that we had, I guess you'd say, was that one of the ship's motor broke down. And of course, you can't stop a convoy that size to help the ship. And you could see that ship gradually becoming a pinpoint on the horizon, and then there was a puff of smoke. So the submarines had been following. Well, we dropped a lot of depth charges, and when you see that ocean shake, they would just, you'd wonder how anything could survive under. And a lot of times you thought you made a kill, because the Germans were getting pretty smart when the torpedo or the depth charges were getting too close. They would shoot garbage out through the torpedo tubes and come up to the surface and say, oh, we got them, we got them. And then they would give up bombing. So then after that they passed ruling that there could be no definition of a kill of a sub until human body parts came up, or a human body. So that reduced a lot of the kills that they had. But on the Dunver, which the ship I was on was Dunver, because the British had a Verdun, we turned ours around to Dunver, and it was a frigate. It's the next thing smaller than a destroyer, and in a complement of maybe 200 to 300 people aboard it. I can't remember, but they're way overstaffed on the ship anyway, because of the number of new electronic things that were coming out that had to be handled. And we would drop depth charges all over sometimes just shake the ship with these depth charges going off, because they were making, it was either a whale down below us or something was, the Aztec signal would go down to the bottom and go beep, beep. Well, then if something came in between it, would beep, 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 and then they knew there was something there. Well, the only thing I heard was reading not too long ago in a book that the Dunver was credited with a kill. Maybe it was while I was aboard. They didn't give the exact date, because they found from the German records that we got a sub. But getting into Londonderry, of course, all sailors love the bar and a few drinks. And I took on the fancy job of being the mailman. That means I would go and take the mail that fellows aboard ship were writing home, and if there was any come in from home, bring them back to the ship. And I took the mail bag up to the first bar, and I handed the bartender, I said, hold on to that, I'll be back in a little while. And I went hitting bars. Then the first thing I thought, gee, we must be getting time about leaving. So I grabbed got the mail bag, and my ship wasn't any further than about from here to that chair, and they were leaving, and I was looking at it. They said, jump, Tiernay, jump, and I knew I wouldn't make it. So I'm running up and down. I thought, my God, if I don't get that ship, I'm in big trouble, because you miss your ship and you're in. And they have a jail over there in the London area that I'll tell you nobody want to go to, because they just stand you up there and apparently you had to hold a rifle up until it just started to drop, and then you started dropping, you got a kick in the rump that straightened you back up again. And also another one they had was these old bombs from the old days of the Marine cannons. They had big iron ball. They would have them in little turrets, about 8 balls or 9 balls to a turret, and the prisoners would have to take them, walk 10 steps and make the turret, and then once that one was made, then move it on another 10 feet, and you did that all day practically. So I was sure glad when I thought, well, I'm going to pay the price, for sure. And I'm running around, and I'm looking for a raft or anything that would get me, because when the ship is pulling out, it's moving very slow. And there, I'm running out, and I said, oh my God, I'm really in trouble. So when I knew I'd missed the ship completely, I was running up and down, and I went further down the dock, and they said, well, there's a corvette down there at North Bay, that's at my hometown, is leaving this afternoon too, going out. And in Ireland, where we left with a mobile, it was like a long bay. It almost seemed it was a river, but it was a long bay that went in. And the ships would gather out at the end of that and get their orders as to the convoy to take back. And when the North Bay said, yeah, they were going out that afternoon, I just stuck to that thing like glue. And when I got to the, out to where the luxury ship was coming around taking orders to all the different ships, kind of a launch. And I said, is the Dunver still here? He says, yeah, it's over there. I said, can I go? He said, you gotta get on. He said, I'll take you over. So when I got there, the gunnery officer was standing on the deck and says, you're a lucky guy, Tiernay. But I sure was lucky to get on that. So we made quite a few trips across, as I say, other than dropping a lot of depth charges and thinking there might be something there. It was pretty well calm, I would say, as far as the ocean was a miserable thing to live on. Anyways, we had regulations aboard ship about drinking or anything like that, and we were coming into harbor in Newfoundland, and we'd been out for a long time hunting submarines, even after we dropped off the ships that were, and they got a contact of something. They figured that a submarine was around there somewhere, so we went all over. And of course, when you've spent 9 days on the ship, you're glad to see land and get out and live a little softer life. So I went down to the Diffie's quarters, where he made up the food that we had for the meals, and they'd opened up a bottle of rum, so we were dabbling into that a bit. And they said, well, let's go back down the ship and to the tail, or the rear end of the ship there, to see what's going on. And we were singing the song, Please Don't Burn Our Outhouse. Well, we didn't say outhouse that time. The song was, Please Don't Burn Our Outhouse, our mother has promised to pay. And the old song went, brothers out in the ocean blue, sisters in the family way. Brother is dead, he passed away, times are mighty hard. Please don't burn our outhouse down, and we left that shit in the yard. I got 7 days, number 11. In the Navy, all your punishment was handled out by numbers. And number 7 was a bad, was meant you had 4 extra hours a day. So I remember going in front of the captain, and when he heard about the song we were singing, he had a kind of smile on his face, and he says, "Were you drunk, Tiernay?" And I said, "No, sir." Well, he says, 7 days, number 11, and keep away from that song, he says. But anyway, we had it was a lot of good days. As I say, we didn't run into any severe situations with the Germans, but as time went by, then I was drafted back to Harbour Grace for a short while, and went on to another ship, the Wentworth, and these ships were built in, the Dunver was a ship built in the eastern side of Canada, and the Wentworth was the western one. It had much more comfortable features, nice bunks, but you slept in the hammock and on all of them. That was your bed, and you rolled it up, and there had to be 8 lashes around it and put in a bin for the day, and then at night you'd take it up, hook it between the 2 hooks, and that was your bed for the night. So finally discharge day came, and we went back. We were discharged in Montreal and got home to glad parents to see, because there was I had 3 other brothers that were in the service, 2 in the Navy beside myself, and another one in the Army. So fortunately we came back without any scratches, and I'm just pleased to be able to come here and speak to you people at night. And that's it. Any questions you'd like to ask? I'd like to ask.
What years were you serving?
I was in 1939 to right to 45, right to the end. Yeah. The ship that were on, they had destroyers and frigates and the 3 planes, the Corvette, the destroyer. Our ship was just a little bit smaller than the destroyer. We traveled usually about 2 frigates, and the rest were corvettes. They'd go up the side of the convoy, back and forth, and we'd be going across the front of it, watching for subs and that's about my history of the. Yes?
Oh, just curious, I don't know too much about the merchant marines, but was there some relationship between some of the duties of the ships that you were on? Like, did you have to go as a convoy to help the merchant marines to get across?
Oh yeah, all those convoys we took were all manned by merchant marine, and you know, nice things happen. The government now has acknowledged that the merchant marine, our sailors, are being acknowledged as veterans, because boy, a lot of them went to the bottom and they didn't have a gun or anything on them. They were just taking tanks and guns and ammunition all across. But we'd have the ship, and I remember seeing the first, I guess it would be the first aircraft carrier. We were just a regular ship with the deck had been cleared with a 2-wing little plane, you know, take a short run, they get up. At least they'd get up and take a look around to see if there's any sign of submarines, but and we used to, they would re-oil and refuel ships at sea. The long hose come along on a ship with loaded down with oil or gas, or not gasoline, but oil, and I guess that's what they were, diesel. But it was a fairly good life. We ate real well. If you were fortunate enough to have a good cook aboard ship, we ate real well. But I enjoyed my years. Yes, sir.
What was the biggest threat to your ship?
Biggest
threat?
Torpedoes. Yeah, that was your watch. See, the Germans at the first of the war, they gathered in groups. And if they caught a convoy, they would do their darndest to try to get underneath the convoy, because we couldn't pick them out then when they're underneath other ships. and then as soon as the first chance they get up and drop a torpedo on them. But that was the main thing, outside the convoy was cruising up and down, watching for anything. Sometimes you didn't know whether it was a whale or something that would make the Aztec sound like there was something there, but everything would start going. Yes?
Did the Canadians have subs in the Second War?
We had, I remember being in Harbour Grace, they had one that came in, no, it wasn't the Canadian, it was the British, but they were pretty old. I remember going, we were allowed to go down inside it, and even in the harbour it was leaking water.
But there was no Canadian subs?
No.
Were you ever on a German sub?
Lots of German subs.
But were you ever on one?
No, not on a German sub, no. No, I guess there wasn't too many.
What do you think about serving on a sub under sea?
I couldn't handle that. That's a terrible life.
Well,
you know, they weren't made for comfort either, because there was so much equipment in them that there was very little room other than you got out of the bunk and another guy got in right after you, because you both used the same spot to sleep. They were crowded.
Did you have any psychological testing before you joined the Navy or before they let you on board ship? Do you know?
No, the main thing they wanted from me was to be able to copy German code. And, excuse me, and that was basically the same thing. And boy, doing that when you're seasick is a tough one. Yeah.
Talking about seasickness, you said you got the sea legs after 4 days. Did any of your fellow crew members never get their sea legs?
Oh yeah, I traveled with a buddy. He was also from North Bay. I was raised in North Bay, and we were both sick. And the thing with the ships, they had all the vegetables and stuff that they could put out around the outside of the funnel, and that's where the heat came up. So in the wintertime, the vegetable wouldn't freeze with the heat. And I remember when we were seasick, we out there shivering, you know, and reach down and get a carrot. And well, nothing got any further than there. But I don't think there's anything worse than seasick, especially if you go on day after day. You wonder, when are you going to get your sea legs? But they come, and then after that, it didn't matter how rough the ocean got, it didn't bother you.
Do you think you would be sick again if you were out on a boat?
You know, I went home on leave for a month, and I thought, am I going to go through that again when I get back? But no, I got a little bit of a headache. That's about it. Yeah. And there was quite a few of us that paid the price of seasickness. That was something that, and they had all kinds of medicines and pills and stuff, but none of them worked. Yeah. Yes.
When you said you copy German code, did you type it down or did you write it down? Did you pass it on to somebody?
Yes, we had earphones on, and they'd come on, a submarine would come on, beep, 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 beep. And they call it a barred B, is a dash, 3 dots and a dash, because there's no such column in the telegraphy, but they made up that one, and then you knew right away. And then you had to be very quick, because they would when you heard them come on, they'd only send about 3 or 4 3-letter codes, and they'd be gone. So if you weren't there to get a bearing, the strongest bearing, and that bearing you'd send in, and of course they were in Newfoundland and England, and when all those bearings come in, they knew just about where that sub was, and we wouldn't go after it. We'd turn away. If they were below us, we'd head north, or if they're north, we'd head south, just so we didn't have to tangle with them at all.
So it was not to decipher what they were saying, it was just to find where they were.
Oh yeah. Well, the one submarine that I think the British and the Canadians were involved in it, they sank, or didn't sink, but the crew gave up, and they got aboard the sub and got the submarine's telegraph outfit, their decoding stream. And of course the Germans didn't know we had it, and we were decoding their messages. So they knew what instructions they were getting and where they would be. And they say that one of the worst decisions Churchill had to make was they decoded it and said that they're going to bombed Croydon the next night, and he couldn't warn the people of Croydon, and there was hundreds killed. But he'd have warned them, and then they know that they got through the code. Yeah.
So that reinforces the importance of your responsibility to find, like, that was the earliest warning.
Yes.
Was your job, but was there any way that they could discern a torpedo coming in, and was it in fact too late if they could visually discern it with binoculars coming?
No, well, what we had, they called it cat gear. I don't know where they got that name from, but it was, excuse me. It was two long bars that they pulled behind the ship, flat bars, and they would vibrate with the water. So when these torpedoes were tuned to come in on sound, and so they'd be coming in after, and it hit them before they'd hit the ship. And so a lot of ships were saved that way with them coming in from behind, and rather than getting the torpedo themselves.
Yeah.
So was that the Enigma machine that they got from the U-boat?
What this was, sir?
The Enigma?
Was it the Enigma machine that they...
I get it was a top secret that they were using for German headquarters, and all this was going in to them. And see, a lot of the messages that come out of Germany and France, when France was occupied, would be dummies. They would send a whole long stuff in with nothing, just garbage. But when we finally got a hold of their decoding machine, that's when we came in, because we'd had all that decoding, and they would make the words and telling them what they're going to do and what they should do and stuff like that. Yeah.
Of course, at that time, it was still all Morse code. Of course, Morse code is no longer an official message sender as of, what, about 3 years ago now?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Yeah, that was the only way we had of contact then. And of course, they had the light signal cord, you know, but,
Yeah,
flags.
yeah,
And flags.
yeah, it was,
Jack, where did you get your initial training in that? You say you started
in Ottawa. I was in Ottawa, I guess, must have been 2-3 months.
That was in the Navy.
Yeah, we were listening into, on the German submarines, they were telling us where the calls were coming from. Like, they'd be coming in from India and all over the place, these signals from offices to the subs out at sea. And that's when they taught us how to, which ones, you know, how the signal would come in and how fast you had to be to get bearings and that on it.
So where did you, but you knew Morse code before you went into
Yes,
the Navy.
yeah.
So how did you get your training on that? What was the process to learn the Morse code for the railroad?
Oh yeah,
Just
well
curious,
yeah, it's a different code. It takes a little while, like the clickety-click-click stuff you heard at the railway station. This was beep, beep, beep stuff, so and some of the letters were different, but surprisingly, when I remember getting to Newfoundland there, and we had this wireless station set up right on the runway where Lindbergh took off, actually with a huge big field, and it wasn't any more than a couple of weeks that you were copying it with no problem at all as far as transposing the letter. There were only about 2 or 3 letters. J was one of them that was the same as a railroad telegraphy. Only a few letters, but it didn't take long before that all straightened out. Yeah.
Did it help that you already knew the Morse code?
Oh yes, yes, because that's what they wanted, experienced people right off the bat, because they didn't have to teach them the code. You know, and if you didn't have that training, I gather you went as a sailor just under. But that's what they asked. I remember they took me in Ottawa, and found out that my railroad career was in telegraphy, so there's no problem.
You say you were picking up messages as far away as India.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe, but I guess the Morse was able to
yeah,
transmit
yeah,
short.
yeah. Surprisingly, they would They could probably, you didn't know where they were coming from actually. A lot of them were coming out of France, but as far away as some in the Indian Ocean, that the old Morse code carried a long way in the water, or over the water.
Did you try to get in the Air Force?
No, no, I don't know what it was, but I just liked the Navy uniform. That's one thing. And Navy didn't do as much marching as soldiers and that, so I liked.
But you weren't familiar with boats before the war?
No, I wasn't. I don't know what it was. I liked the bell-bottom trousers.
What about the Army? You didn't like that?
That's a lot of fun.
You didn't like the mud?
No. My youngest brother, or one of the youngest, was in the service. He was in the Army, but he was so late, like just coming of age, that he never got in any action, thank goodness. But I often wonder what my parents must have gone through, because 4 or 5 of their sons out there somewhere, and we all come back without a scratch.
Great.
Did you have any sisters?
2 sisters, yeah.
Were they in the service?
No, one was older than me, and she was, and the other was quite a bit younger. No,
Jack, your vessel, it was steam, I guess. Would it be a turbine, or was it a motor vessel? And what speed? What was your top speed, if you don't mind telling me? Approximately.
Gee, you kind of got me there. I know the convoy didn't move that fast, you know, because you had all kinds of ships, and some of them old, and it would take us 9 to 10 days to get across that ocean.
So it was a slow trip.
So it's a slow, yeah, because, yeah, I don't know, whatever they were using, they wouldn't allow any smoke anyways to come out of the stacks of the ship, so that it would give away, you know, the smoke from far away.
Yeah.
Did you hear a lot of distress signals too?
No, I can't say as I ever did.
Not in that area?
Yeah, no. Mostly, and sometimes you would go for hours without a signal, then all of a sudden it would become wild with signals from the sub to the mainland, you know, back and forth. But I know one sailor got himself in a lot of trouble, because the way the message would come out to it would be this barred B, and then a 3-letter group, and a 4, and a 4, and a 4, and then maybe off the air. And he decided to have a sleep, so he just put down ABC and he just made it up. Of course, when they didn't know we were breaking the code, I guess, and when they found out he was just putting down phony letters, you know, when other stuff was coming in showing it was an actual message. So he went in the hoosegow for a while. Yeah.
Just knowing what the message was, or not knowing, just having those letters down, didn't tell you which direction it came from. Did you have an antenna you had to turn? Did you have any mechanical means?
No, these were all just one main antenna board ship and the same at Harbour Grace, Newfoundland. The one big antenna would pick up these signals, and how, I guess they would know wherever all the stuff went in, and the teletype was becoming coming into being at that time, because I remember we had a teletype at Harbour Grace, and all this stuff would be sent into New York and different places, because these stations were situated and placed all around the map, so that when they drew the lines of where they came from, they'd show right where the sub was pretty well. Yes.
Excuse me, I think Eddie has one question, and then
Yeah.
I think because we have a second part to our program, that we can ask Jack questions when we're having our tea.
Oh, great.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, and as they say...
Excuse me, Betty just has one question,
Oh,
and then hers will be the last for
I
now.
presume you wore white all the time, so who washed those uniforms?
Well, you know the funny thing, if you're you know, the old bell bottom and the lap that went across your shoulder with the 3 white stripes on, if that was dark blue, you'd say, oh, he just joined yesterday. So these guys would tie that on a rope behind the ship and drag it through salt water for a day. When they come out, it looked pretty bleak, then they, oh, he's been around. Yeah, but I like in fact, it kind of broke my heart when they took away all those uniforms, just made everything the same practically except for the label on your shoulder now. But the old bell bottom, you got a lot of nice girls. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you.